Say goodbye to the fish, my daughter-in-law whispered as she pushed me off the sailboat. My son Marcus just stood there watching. Their plan was to steal my $2.8 billion fortune. But when they returned home later that evening, I was sitting in my favorite reading chair with a very special surprise waiting for them. If you're watching this, subscribe and let me know where you're watching from. Let me back up and tell you how a perfectly ordinary Wednesday afternoon led to me falling into the Pacific Ocean. I suppose I should have seen it coming. But at 69, I still believed that family meant something. That blood was thicker than salt water, if you will. The afternoon had started pleasantly enough. Marcus had called me personally, not through his secretary, which should have been my first warning sign, inviting me for what he called a recovery celebration on his new sailboat. "Mom, we want to celebrate your recovery from the procedure," he'd said, his voice warm with what I mistook for genuine care. Just the three of us, like old times. I'd been recovering from my knee replacement surgery for 8 weeks. And honestly, I was desperate for any sign that my son and his wife Jessica still wanted me in their lives since my husband William died 18 months ago, leaving me with his pharmaceutical empire fortune. Things had felt different between us, distant. So, I dressed carefully that afternoon in my emerald green blouse, the one William always said complimented my hair, and took a car service to the marina. The sailboat was stunning, a sleek white vessel that probably cost more than most people make in a lifetime. Marcus greeted me at the pier with a hug that felt rehearsed, while Jessica observed from the deck, her smile cold as winter. "Isn't she gorgeous?" Marcus asked, gesturing to the boat. 38 feet of pure elegance. We're thinking of sailing her to Hawaii next season. What he didn't mention was that they'd bought it with the money I'd given them last year to invest in Marcus's marketing agency. $2.5 million that I was beginning to suspect had never seen the inside of any business account. The first hour was agreeable enough. We sailed into peaceful waters, the California coastline growing distant behind us. Jessica served wine spritzers and discussed their plans to remodel the house, my former house, which I'd transferred to them after William died because I thought moving to the apartment would be easier. But then Marcus started asking questions, innocent ones at first, about my estate planning, about the trust structures, about whether I'd considered making changes to streamline things for them. "It's just that estate taxes can be so complicated, Mom," he said, refilling my wine glass with excessive enthusiasm. "We want to make sure everything's organized properly." That's when I noticed Jessica recording me with her phone. Not obviously, but holding it at an angle while pretending to check messages, capturing me on video while I was drinking, while I was discussing financial matters, building some kind of record. The pieces fell into place with terrible clarity. The surgery I'd had. They'd insisted on managing all my paperwork afterward. The healthcare proxy documents they'd brought to the hospital, claiming it was just temporary, just to help with medical decisions while I recovered. The way my estate attorney had stopped responding to my calls. "Marcus," I said carefully, setting down my glass, "I'd like to return to shore now." That's when his facade crumbled completely. "I'm afraid that's not going to happen, Mom." His voice was different now, colder. "See, we need to have a discussion about your condition, about your cognitive issues." Cognitive issues? I was sharper than both of them combined. "You've been showing signs of dementia," Jessica added, stepping closer. "We have it documented. The doctors agree that you're no longer capable of managing your financial affairs." That's preposterous. But even as I said it, I realized how carefully they'd orchestrated this. The boat was miles from shore, no other vessels in sight. Just the three of us, the ocean, and their plan to either convince me to sign over everything or— "Mom, we're trying to help you," Marcus said. But his eyes were as cold as steel. "We can do this the easy way or the hard way." I stood up slowly, my knee still aching, but my mind crystal clear. And if I refuse? That's when Jessica smiled. Really smiled. For the first time all day. Well, elderly woman, recent surgery, probably took too many pain medications, got confused on the boat. She shrugged. Tragic accidents happen all the time. I'd raised this man from infancy, taught him to swim, paid for his education, his wedding, his house, and now he was standing there nodding along while his wife threatened my life. You're both insane if you think you'll get away with this. Actually, Mom, we've thought it through quite thoroughly. Marcus pulled out a folder of papers. Your signature here, transferring all assets to us immediately for your own protection, and we all go home safely. I looked at the documents, at my son's expectant face, at Jessica's phone, still recording. Then I looked at the ocean, vast and treacherous, and somehow less frightening than the two people who were supposed to love me. Go to hell, I said. That's when Jessica moved behind me and whispered those words about fish. The push wasn't brutal. They were too clever for that. Just a sudden shove when I was off balance, looking out at the water. Over I went, emerald blouse and all, into the cold Pacific. As I hit the water, I heard Marcus shouting, "Mom!" Oh God, Mom. But I also heard Jessica's voice, quieter, talking to someone on the phone. Yes, we'll need you to file the emergency guardianship petition first thing Monday morning. She's clearly not competent. Then the water closed over my head, and I had bigger problems than their betrayal. I'm a decent swimmer. William and I used to swim laps together every evening, but the cold shocked my system, and my clothes were weighing me down. I kicked off my sandals and broke the surface, gasping, just in time to see the sailboat speeding away. They were actually leaving me there to die. That's when I spotted the fishing charter. Captain Tommy Rodriguez was exactly the kind of man who'd dive into shark-infested waters to save a drowning grandmother. 50-something, weathered from decades on the ocean, and possessed of the kind of moral compass that seemed to be missing from my own family tree. "Holy shit, lady, what happened to you?" he asked, as he and his adult son Luis hauled me aboard their fishing vessel. I was shivering uncontrollably, my teeth chattering so hard I could barely speak. Tommy wrapped me in a blanket that smelled of salt and diesel while Luis started the engine. My family, I managed between chattering teeth. The sailboat. We saw them take off like lightning, Tommy said grimly. Didn't look back once. What kind of people leave someone floating in the middle of the ocean? The kind who inherit $2.8 billion if I'm not around to stop them, I thought. But out loud, I just said, the kind who aren't really family. Tommy radioed the Coast Guard while Luis wrapped another blanket around me. This is the Maria Elena. We've got a woman we pulled from the water about 15 miles west of Santa Barbara. She's conscious, responsive, but needs medical attention. Wait, I said, grabbing Tommy's arm. Please don't. Don't let them know you found me. Not yet. Tommy studied my face with the sharp eyes of someone who'd seen enough of life to recognize when someone was running from more than just cold water. You in some kind of trouble? Yes, but not the kind you're thinking. I took a shaky breath. I need to get to shore without anyone knowing I survived. Can you help me? Luis looked at his father uncertainly. Dad, shouldn't we? Should and shouldn't are funny things, Tommy said slowly. Sometimes doing the right thing doesn't look like following the rules. He keyed the radio again. Coast Guard, this is Maria Elena. False alarm on that rescue. Turned out to be debris in the water. All clear. As we headed toward a small private dock Tommy knew, I told them everything about Marcus and Jessica, about the money, about the documents they wanted me to sign. Tommy listened without interruption, his expression growing darker with each detail. So, they figured they'd rather be rich orphans than broke kids with a living mother, Tommy said when I finished. Apparently so. What are you going to do? That was the question, wasn't it? What was I going to do? I was officially dead as far as Marcus and Jessica knew. They'd go back to shore, call the authorities, report me missing overboard, play the grieving family while they executed whatever legal documents they'd prepared. But here's the thing about being supposedly dead. It gives you options you never had while you were alive. I'm going to let them think they won, I said, surprised by how steady my voice sounded. And then, I'm going to destroy them. Tommy grinned for the first time since pulling me from the water. Now that sounds like a plan worth helping with. Luis dropped us at a tiny dock in a cove I'd never seen before. Tommy knew a woman there who ran a small guest house. No questions asked. Cash only. Mrs. Nguyen, a sharp-looking woman in her 60s who took one look at my bedraggled state and immediately started heating soup, didn't even blink when Tommy explained I needed a place to stay off the radar for a while. "Honey, I've been running this place for 25 years," she said, ladling chicken broth into a bowl. "I've seen people running from all kinds of things. Long as you're not bringing violence to my door, you're welcome." That evening, while Marcus and Jessica were presumably filing police reports about their tragically missing mother, I sat in Mrs. Nguyen's kitchen wearing borrowed clothes and planning their downfall. Tommy had agreed to be my eyes and ears. His boat was legitimately used for fishing charters, which meant he was often around the marina where Marcus kept the sailboat. He could monitor their movements, listen to their conversations, maybe even do some investigating of his own. "Here's what I don't understand," I said, sipping my third cup of coffee. "How are they planning to make this legal? Even if I died accidentally, there are procedures, investigations." "That's what's been bothering me too," Tommy agreed. "They had to have more than just forged documents. Someone on the inside." That night, I made a list of everyone who'd had access to my financial information since William died. My lawyer, my accountant, my financial advisor, the bank managers, the trust officers. Someone had been feeding Marcus and Jessica information, helping them plan this, and I was going to find out who. But first, I needed to know exactly what story they were telling about my disappearance. Mrs. Nguyen had an old laptop with internet access, and I spent hours reading news reports about the tragic boating accident that claimed the life of prominent businessman William Chen's widow. The articles painted a picture of a grieving family dealing with an elderly woman's declining mental state. Marcus was quoted extensively talking about my confusion and memory issues in recent months. Jessica had apparently wept to reporters about how worried they'd been about my safety. They'd even included a photo. Me at Marcus's graduation party last year, looking slightly bewildered as I held a drink. I remembered that moment. I'd been confused because no one had told me it was a surprise celebration. I'd arrived at what I thought was a quiet family dinner to find 30 strangers in my former home. But in the photo, I just looked lost and elderly. Exactly the image they wanted to project. The obituary was already online. Helen Chen, beloved mother and philanthropist, passed away in a tragic boating accident while enjoying an outing with her devoted family. In lieu of flowers, the family requests donations to the Dementia Research Foundation. Even in death, they were spinning the narrative of my supposed mental decline. "Bastards," I muttered, closing the laptop. Mrs. Nguyen looked up from her crossword puzzle. "Planning something special for them?" "Oh yes," I said. "Something very special indeed." The funeral was surprisingly well attended for someone who was supposedly suffering from dementia. I watched from across the cemetery through binoculars Tommy had borrowed from his fishing gear, hidden behind a maintenance building that gave me a perfect view of the proceedings. Marcus had spared no expense. Premium casket. Empty, of course. Elaborate flower arrangements. A professional program with my photo on the front. He and Jessica stood at the graveside in perfectly coordinated black, accepting condolences from friends, business associates, and people I barely recognized. What struck me most was how genuinely sad some of the mourners looked. My neighbor Patricia was crying openly. My garden club friends had come. Even Dr. Martinez, who'd handled my knee surgery, was there looking somber. These people genuinely cared about me, and Marcus and Jessica were accepting their sympathy while knowing full well I was alive. "See anything interesting?" Tommy whispered, crouching beside me. "Besides my son giving an Oscar-worthy performance? Look at who's not there." Tommy adjusted his own binoculars. "Like who?" "My financial advisor, Stephen Blake, my lawyer, Catherine Mills, my accountant, Richard Foster." I lowered the binoculars, pieces clicking into place. The people who would normally be at the funeral of a client worth $2.8 billion are nowhere to be seen. Maybe they're busy with the estate stuff. Maybe. Or maybe they can't look people in the eye while they're part of this scheme. After the service, I watched Marcus and Jessica work the crowd like politicians, shaking hands, accepting hugs, playing their roles perfectly. But I also noticed how quickly they ushered people away when anyone started asking detailed questions about my final days. That afternoon, Tommy drove me back to Mrs. Nguyen's in his pickup truck, taking a roundabout route to avoid any chance encounters. I'd been officially dead for 5 days now, and I was starting to understand the unique advantages of my situation. "I need to get into my old house," I told him as we pulled into Mrs. Nguyen's driveway. "That seems dangerous. They're probably staying there now, right?" "Not according to the property records I looked up this morning. They kept their own place. My house has been sitting empty since I moved to the condo last year." I pulled out a piece of paper where I'd been making notes. But here's the interesting part. Someone's been paying the utilities, the gas, water, electricity. Someone's maintaining it. Why would they do that if no one's living there? Good question. I think it's time I found out. That night, Tommy dropped me off 3 blocks from my former home in Montecito. The house where I'd lived with William for 30 years, raised Marcus, hosted countless dinner parties and holiday celebrations. The house I'd signed over to my son because I thought family meant something. It was after midnight and the street was quiet except for the occasional car passing. I still had my key. Marcus had never thought to ask for it back, and I slipped around to the back door like a criminal breaking into my own former home. The house felt different. Not empty exactly, but wrong somehow. I made my way through the familiar rooms using the flashlight Tommy had given me, being careful to avoid the windows facing the street. The living room furniture was covered with sheets, but I could see that new pieces had been added. Expensive pieces. A sectional sofa that cost more than most people's cars. An entertainment system that definitely wasn't there when I'd lived here. In the kitchen, the refrigerator was stocked, not with the basics you'd keep in a house you occasionally visited, but with fresh food, expensive food, imported cheeses, organic produce, the kind of premium items that suggested regular occupancy. But it was the home office, William's old study, where I found what I was really looking for. The desk was covered with documents, legal papers, financial statements, and most damning of all, a detailed timeline of what they called the Helen Project. My own name turned into a code word for my elimination. I photographed everything with the disposable camera Tommy had given me, my hands shaking with rage as I read through their plans. They'd been working on this for over 18 months, carefully documenting what they claimed were signs of my mental deterioration. Doctor visits where they'd coached me to seem confused. Social situations where they'd set me up to look disoriented. The graduation party photo in the newspaper. They'd deliberately not told me it was a surprise party, then captured my confused reaction. The medication mix-up I'd had 4 months ago that landed me in the emergency room, they'd switched my prescription bottles. Every moment of confusion, every instance where I'd seemed off balance or forgetful, had been carefully orchestrated and documented as evidence of dementia. But the most chilling document was a letter from someone signed only as LR, apparently one of their co-conspirators. The timeline needs to be accelerated. Helen's been asking too many questions about the healthcare proxy documents. If she gets suspicious and goes to a lawyer independently, everything falls apart. I recommend moving to Phase 3 within the next 3 weeks. Phase 3, according to the timeline, was my death. I was photographing the last document when I heard a car door slam outside. Headlights swept across the front windows, and I heard voices approaching the front door. Marcus and Jessica coming home from their grief performance. I quickly gathered my things and headed for the back door, but I could hear their conversation as they entered. Think the Rodriguez woman bought it? She was crying too hard to think straight. Besides, what's she going to investigate? Mom fell off a boat. It happens. What about the estate? How long before we can access everything? Probate opens Monday. LR says we'll have full access to the accounts within 8 weeks. I slipped out the back door and into the garden, my heart pounding. But as I crept along the side of the house toward the street, I heard something that stopped me cold. A baby crying. There was a baby in my former house. Marcus and Jessica had never mentioned having a child, which meant there was more to this story than I'd realized. The baby changed everything. As I crouched behind the rose bushes I'd planted 15 years ago, listening to the sound of an infant crying in my former home, I realized this wasn't just about my money. This was about something much bigger. Tommy picked me up at the corner 20 minutes later, and I was still shaking as I climbed into his truck. "You look like you've seen a ghost," he said. "Worse. I've seen my replacement." I told him about the baby, about the documents, about the mysterious LR who seemed to be orchestrating everything. "A baby," Tommy repeated slowly. "They never mentioned having a kid. Never. And Marcus always said he and Jessica weren't ready for children, said they were too focused on building their careers." I pulled out my disposable camera. I need to get these photos developed, but not at any place they might have connections. Tommy knew a guy in Ventura who ran a 1-hour photo shop and didn't ask questions. While we waited for the pictures, we sat in Tommy's truck drinking coffee from a convenience store and trying to piece together the puzzle. "So, they've been planning this for over a year," Tommy said, studying my notes. "Systematically making you look incompetent, documenting everything, getting someone inside your financial team to help them. And now, there's a baby involved, which means either they've been lying about having children or—" I stopped. Another possibility occurring to me. Or the baby isn't theirs. What do you mean? Think about it. If they've been planning to steal my fortune, they'd want to make sure they have a legitimate heir, someone to inherit everything if something happened to them. But they'd need a child with the right bloodline, the right legal claim. Tommy looked at me with concern. "You think they stole a baby?" "I think they did something. And I think LR, whoever that is the key to understanding what." The photos were devastating when developed. Clear evidence of their 18-month conspiracy, complete with timelines, fake medical reports, and financial projections showing how they planned to spend my money. But the most disturbing photo was the last one. A birth certificate I'd almost missed, tucked under other papers. Baby Chen, born 4 weeks ago. Mother, Jessica Chen. Father, Marcus Chen. But I'd been around Jessica just 5 days ago on that sailboat. She definitely wasn't recovering from childbirth. "This birth certificate is fake," I told Tommy, "completely fabricated." "So whose baby is it?" That night, I couldn't sleep. I lay in Mrs. Nguyen's guest room, staring at the ceiling and thinking about everything I'd learned. My son and daughter-in-law had spent over a year systematically destroying my reputation, planning my murder, and forging documents to steal my fortune. And now they had a baby whose existence they were hiding from the world. The next morning, I made a decision that surprised even me. "I'm going back," I told Tommy over breakfast, "but not to the house. I'm going to follow them." That's dangerous as hell, Helen. If they see you, they won't, because as far as they know, I'm fish food. I spread out a local map on Mrs. Nguyen's kitchen table. Look, they have to take the baby somewhere during the day. Daycare, babysitter, something. Babies don't just disappear for 10 hours while their parents play grieving family. Tommy studied the map doubtfully. And what are you hoping to find? The truth about that baby, and hopefully the identity of LR. Mrs. Nguyen, who'd been quietly listening while washing dishes, finally spoke up. There's a private investigator in town who owes me a favor. Professional, discreet, and very good at following people without being seen. I can't involve anyone else in this, I protested. Honey, Mrs. Nguyen said, drying her hands on a dish towel. You're way past being able to handle this alone. These people tried to kill you. They're not going to hesitate to try again if they figure out you're alive. She was right, of course, but hiring a private investigator would require admitting to more people that I wasn't actually dead. It meant expanding the circle of people who knew my secret. What kind of favor does this investigator owe you? Mrs. Nguyen smiled mysteriously. The kind where my nephew didn't go to prison for something stupid he did when he was 19. I named Alex Rivera, former Marine, very reliable, and excellent at making problems disappear. By noon, I was sitting in Alex Rivera's small office above a coffee shop in downtown Santa Barbara, telling my story for the third time in a week. Alex was about 45 with graying temples and the kind of alert eyes that missed nothing. So, you want me to follow your son and daughter-in-law, find out about this mysterious baby and identify their co-conspirator, he summarized after I finished. That's right. And you're paying me with what? Because according to the newspapers, all your assets are frozen pending probate. I pulled out an envelope I'd prepared earlier. Cash. I had some emergency money hidden in a safety deposit box that Marcus doesn't know about. William always insisted we keep liquid funds available for emergencies. Alex flipped through the bills, enough to cover 2 weeks of surveillance, and nodded. I'll need photos of the targets and any addresses where they might be staying. I gave him everything I had, including the photos from my break-in at the house. Alex studied them carefully, paying particular attention to the documents with the mysterious LR signature. This handwriting looks familiar, he said, pulling out a magnifying glass. Professional, but with some distinctive characteristics. Mind if I run this through some databases? Do whatever you need to do. One more thing, Alex said as I prepared to leave. If these people are as dangerous as you say, we need a safety protocol. You check in with me every 12 hours. If I don't hear from you, I take everything to the police. I agreed, though I hoped it wouldn't come to that. The less official involvement, the better, at least until I understood exactly what Marcus and Jessica had done. That afternoon, I went back to Mrs. Nguyen's and waited and planned, because now I had help. Real help, professional help, and in less than 24 hours I was going to know exactly who had tried to kill me and why. Alex Rivera was worth every penny I'd paid him. By the end of the second day, he had more information about Marcus and Jessica's activities than I'd learned in months of living with them. Your son's been very busy since you allegedly died, Alex said, spreading photographs across Mrs. Nguyen's kitchen table. Multiple meetings with lawyers, 2 visits to the bank, and 3 separate trips to a private medical facility outside Los Angeles. Medical facility? Sunshine Reproductive Services. Very exclusive, very expensive, and very discreet. Alex pointed to a photo of Marcus and Jessica entering a modern glass building. They specialize in surrogacy arrangements for wealthy clients who want to maintain privacy. The pieces were clicking into place, and the picture they formed made my stomach turn. They bought a baby. Looks like it, and not just any baby. They specifically requested a newborn that could pass for their biological child. According to my contact at Sunshine, the arrangements were made 10 months ago, paid for in cash, with instructions to have the birth certificate pre-prepared. Mrs. Nguyen sat down with 3 cups of coffee and joined us at the table. So they planned your death, bought a baby to inherit your fortune, and had someone inside your financial team helping them. About that, Alex said, pulling out another photo. I think I found LR. The photo showed a woman in her 40s with shoulder-length blonde hair and an expensive briefcase shaking hands with Marcus outside a downtown law office. She looked vaguely familiar, but I couldn't place her. Lauren Rodriguez, partner at Mitchell Rodriguez and Associates. They handle estate planning for several prominent California families. Rodriguez, I repeated. Wait, Richard Foster is my accountant? Are they related? Married. And here's where it gets interesting. Lauren Rodriguez has been quietly building a client base of wealthy, elderly individuals with strained family relationships. She specializes in what she calls family transition planning. I stared at the photo, recognition finally dawning. I met her about 8 months ago at some charity function Marcus brought me to. She was very interested in my estate planning, kept asking questions about my trust structures. I'll bet she was, because Lauren Rodriguez has a very specific business model. She identifies elderly clients with substantial assets and estranged families, then helps the families accelerate their inheritance through what she calls compassionate intervention. You mean murder, Mrs. Nguyen said bluntly. I mean, she creates legal frameworks that allow families to take control of assets while the elderly person is still alive, using claims of incompetence, dementia, or diminished capacity. She's done it at least 8 times in the past 4 years. Alex spread out more photos, surveillance shots of Lauren Rodriguez meeting with different families, entering various law offices, visiting what appeared to be private medical facilities. She's running a whole operation, finds wealthy elderly people with greedy relatives, helps orchestrate evidence of mental decline, provides legal cover for asset transfers, and takes a substantial cut of the inheritance. And if the elderly person refuses to cooperate or gets suspicious, they have accidents, I finished. Boating mishaps, falls downstairs, medication overdoses, always tragic, always plausibly accidental, and always financially convenient for the surviving family. I felt sick. This wasn't just about my money. It was about a systematic operation targeting vulnerable seniors. How many people has she killed? That I can prove? None. That, I suspect? At least 15 over the past 6 years. She's very good at covering her tracks, and she only works with families who can provide plausible alternative explanations for their relatives' deaths. We have to stop her. We will. But first, we need to understand exactly what your son and daughter-in-law have already put in motion. Because according to my sources, they filed preliminary probate documents yesterday. Alex pulled out a legal folder. They're claiming you died intestate without a valid will, which would make them your sole heirs. They're also claiming that any existing estate planning documents are invalid because they were signed while you were mentally incompetent. But I have a will. A very specific, detailed will that was updated just 18 months ago. I know. I found it. Alex opened the folder and pulled out a familiar document, my will, with what appeared to be my signature at the bottom. But the text was completely different from what I remembered signing. They replaced it, I whispered, scanning the forged document. This leaves everything to Marcus with provisions for any future children he might have, including the baby they just acquired through Sunshine Reproductive Services. I stood up and walked to Mrs. Nguyen's window, looking out at the ocean. A week ago, I'd been a grieving widow trying to maintain a relationship with my only family. Now I was a murder victim who'd survived her own assassination, discovering that my son was part of a larger criminal enterprise targeting elderly people. There's something else, Alex said gently, about the baby. I turned back to face him. The birth mother was an 18-year-old girl named Maria Santos. Runaway from Nevada. No family, no support system. Lauren Rodriguez found her at a shelter in Las Vegas and offered her $60,000 to carry a baby for a loving couple who couldn't have children. Where is she now? Alex's expression was grim. According to the medical records, she died from complications during delivery, but I spoke to a nurse at Sunshine who remembers Maria. Healthy girl, no risk factors, normal pregnancy right up until the day she gave birth. The implication hung in the air like smoke. They killed her, I said. I think so, but I can't prove it yet. What I can prove is that your son and daughter-in-law are part of a criminal organization that's been systematically murdering elderly people for their money. And tomorrow morning, they're meeting with Lauren Rodriguez to finalize the legal transfer of your assets. I sat back down, my mind racing. Where? Rodriguez's office downtown, 9 a.m. I looked at Mrs. Nguyen, then at Alex, then at the photos spread across the table showing my son shaking hands with a professional killer. Then I guess it's time for Helen Chen to rise from the dead. The hardest part about planning your return from the dead is deciding which audience gets the shock first. I could confront Marcus and Jessica privately, giving them a chance to explain themselves, but that assumed they deserved an explanation. Or I could make my resurrection public, letting them discover I was alive the same way the rest of the world would. I chose option 3, strategic haunting. You want to what? Alex asked when I explained my plan. I want them to know I'm alive but not know how much I know about their operation. I want them scared, off balance, making mistakes. Mrs. Nguyen nodded approvingly. Psychological warfare. I like it. The plan was simple, but effective. While Marcus, Jessica, and Lauren Rodriguez were in their downtown meeting dividing up my assets, I would be making my presence known in more subtle ways. Alex had discovered that they were keeping the baby at Marcus's house during the day, with a private nurse who'd been hired through one of Lauren Rodriguez's front companies. The nurse, a woman named Grace Thompson, had no idea she was caring for a baby that had been essentially purchased through the death of its teenage mother. Grace is a good person, Alex assured me after running a background check. Single mom, nursing degree, clean record. She probably thinks she's helping a legitimate family with childcare. Then she deserves to know the truth. That morning, while Marcus and Jessica were downtown legally erasing me from existence, I stood on the front porch of my former home and rang the doorbell. Grace Thompson was younger than I'd expected, maybe 30, with tired eyes and genuine warmth. She opened the door holding a baby bottle and wearing scrubs covered with cartoon animals. "Can I help you?" she asked. "Hello, Grace. My name is Helen Chen. I believe you're caring for my grandson." The blood drained from her face. She knew that name. It had been all over the news for the past week. The wealthy widow who died in a boating accident. You're dead. It was in the papers. On the news. Your son said. My son said a lot of things, apparently. Not all of them true. I smiled gently. "May I come in? I think we need to talk." Grace stepped back, still staring at me like I was actually a ghost. "But you died. In the papers. On the news. Your son said." My son said a lot of things, apparently. Not all of them true. I followed her into the living room, my former living room, where a baby sat in a bouncy seat, gurgling contentedly. "Oh," I breathed, seeing the infant for the first time. "Oh, you beautiful thing." The baby was perfect, maybe 4 weeks old, with dark hair and serious brown eyes. He was wearing an expensive outfit, and the room around him was filled with high-end baby equipment that must have cost thousands of dollars. "What's his name?" I asked, settling into a chair beside the bouncy seat. "Baby Chen," Grace said automatically, then caught herself. I mean, they said his name was going to be William Jr. after his grandfather, but they haven't decided for sure. They haven't decided because they don't know him well enough to name him, I said softly. Because he's not really their baby, is he? Grace sat down heavily on the sofa. I don't understand what's happening. You're supposed to be dead. And Marcus and Jessica, they're supposed to be grieving parents who needed help with their newborn while they dealt with family matters. Grace, I need you to listen very carefully. This baby is not Marcus and Jessica's biological child. They purchased him through an illegal surrogacy arrangement that resulted in the death of his birth mother, and they attempted to murder me 6 days ago so they could steal my inheritance and raise this child as their heir. That's impossible. I pulled out the photos Alex had taken, the documents I'd copied from Marcus's home office, the evidence of Lauren Rodriguez's criminal operation. I showed Grace everything, watching her expression shift from disbelief to horror as the scope of the conspiracy became clear. Who gave birth to this baby was named Maria Santos, I said gently. She was 18 years old with no family, no support system. They told her she was helping a loving couple who couldn't have children. She died during delivery under suspicious circumstances. Grace was crying now, looking at the baby with new understanding. He's an orphan. Yes. And if Marcus and Jessica get away with this, he'll grow up thinking they're his parents, never knowing his real mother died to give him life. What do you want me to do? I want you to take pictures. Document everything you can about how they treat him, what they've told you, who else has been involved. And then I want you to help me make sure this baby grows up knowing the truth about where he came from. Grace wiped her eyes and nodded. His real name should be William Maria Chen, after his grandfather and his birth mother. That's perfect. I spent an hour with Grace and baby William Maria, taking photos, documenting the setup in my former home, and explaining what would happen next. Grace agreed to continue caring for the baby while secretly gathering evidence and keeping me informed about Marcus and Jessica's activities. They'll be back around noon, she told me as I prepared to leave. They always come home for lunch to check on him, make phone calls, handle business. Perfect. By then, they'll have received my first message. While I'd been talking to Grace, Alex had been busy downtown. He'd parked across from Lauren Rodriguez's office building with a telephoto lens, taking pictures of Marcus and Jessica entering the building, meeting with Rodriguez, shaking hands over what they thought was my legal death certificate. But the real gift was what Tommy had delivered to their lawyer's office while they were in the meeting. I'd written a simple note on elegant stationery. Dear Marcus and Jessica, reports of my death have been greatly exaggerated. We need to talk. Love, Mom. P.S. Give my regards to little William Maria. He's beautiful. The note was delivered by messenger at exactly 10:43 a.m., while they were still in Rodriguez's office finalizing the probate paperwork. According to Alex, who watched from across the street, all three of them came running out of the building within minutes of receiving the note, their faces white with panic. The psychological warfare had begun. And that afternoon, when they returned to my former house, expecting to find their comfortable conspiracy intact, they were going to discover that their supposedly dead victim had been very busy indeed. Because I wasn't just alive. I was angry, I was armed with evidence, and I was ready for war. I was sitting in my favorite reading chair, the one William had bought me for our 25th anniversary, when Marcus and Jessica came home from their meeting with Lauren Rodriguez. I'd positioned myself so I'd be the first thing they saw when they walked through the front door of what used to be my house. The look on their faces was worth 6 days in the Pacific Ocean. Hello, darlings, I said pleasantly, not getting up. How was your meeting? I hope you didn't sign anything important while I was away. Jessica screamed. Actually screamed like she'd seen her worst nightmare come to life, which I suppose she had. Marcus just stood there with his mouth open, still holding his keys, staring at me like I might disappear if he blinked hard enough. Surprised? I asked. I have to say the reports of my death were terribly premature, though I did enjoy reading my own obituary. Dementia donations? Really? That was a nice touch. Grace appeared from the kitchen carrying baby William Maria. She'd been waiting in the back of the house as we'd planned, ready to witness whatever happened next. Mrs. Chen asked me to bring the baby out, Grace said nervously. She wanted to meet her grandson properly. Her grandson? Jessica found her voice, though it came out as a croak. Grace, this woman is... she's dead. Dead? I supplied helpfully. Yes, we covered that. Turns out drowning is harder than it looks, especially when there are good people around to pull you out of the water. Marcus finally managed to speak. Mom, we thought... The Coast Guard searched. The Coast Guard searched for debris, not survivors. Funny how that works when no one actually reports a person overboard. I accepted the baby from Grace, settling him comfortably in my arms. Hello, little William Maria. I'm your real grandmother, not the kind who tries to buy you with blood money. His name isn't William Maria, Jessica snapped, some of her composure returning. His name is whatever we decide to name him because he's our son. Is he? I looked down at the baby who was looking back at me with those serious brown eyes. Tell me, Jessica, when exactly did you give birth? Because 6 days ago on that sailboat you certainly didn't look like someone who delivered a baby 4 weeks earlier. Silence. The birth was private, Jessica said weakly. Yes, I'm sure it was very private indeed. So private that the actual mother died during delivery under mysterious circumstances. I looked up at them both. Did you know her name was Maria Santos? 18 years old from Nevada. No family to ask questions when she disappeared. The silence in the room was deafening. Grace gasped, covering her mouth with her hand. That's impossible, Marcus said, but his voice lacked conviction. We would never... Never what? Never conspire with Lauren Rodriguez to run an illegal surrogacy operation? Never systematically poison an elderly woman's reputation to steal her fortune? Never push your own mother off a sailboat and leave her for dead? I stood up slowly, still holding the baby. Which part exactly would you never do, Marcus? Jessica recovered first, her shock transforming into the cold calculation I'd seen on the sailboat. Prove it. You can make all the accusations you want, but proving any of it is another matter entirely. Oh, darling, I said, smiling for the first time since they'd walked in. You really shouldn't have said that. Grace, would you mind taking William Maria to his room for his nap? I asked, not taking my eyes off Marcus and Jessica. The grown-ups need to have a conversation. After Grace left with the baby, I walked over to the mantelpiece where Marcus had displayed several family photos, none of which included me, I noticed. Sit down, I said, my voice carrying the authority that had once run William's household staff. Both of you. They sat, still looking shell-shocked. Let me tell you what I've been doing for the past week while you've been planning my funeral and dividing up my assets. I pulled out a manila folder from behind the chair cushion. I've been investigating and learning and documenting. I spread the photographs Alex had taken across the coffee table. Marcus and Jessica meeting with Lauren Rodriguez, multiple visits to Sunshine Reproductive Services, financial documents showing the cash payments for the baby. This is Lauren Rodriguez, I said, pointing to one photo. She specializes in helping families like you accelerate their inheritances through what she calls compassionate intervention. In plain English, she helps greedy relatives murder elderly people for their money. That's ridiculous, Jessica said, but she was staring at the photos with growing alarm. Is it? Because I have documentation of at least 8 other cases where Lauren Rodriguez provided legal cover for families who wanted their elderly relatives dead. 8 other families who suddenly had convenient accidents after showing signs of mental decline that were later proven to be artificially induced. I pulled out another set of documents. Like Mrs. Eleanor Walsh, age 75, fell down the stairs in her own home 3 weeks after her son started adding sedatives to her evening tea. Her son inherited $1.8 million. Marcus had gone very pale. "Mom, you're scaring yourself with conspiracy theories." Or Mr. Charles Bennett, age 70, died in a single car accident after his daughter convinced his doctor that his medication needed to be adjusted. His daughter inherited $3.2 million. I looked directly at Marcus. "These aren't theories, son. These are murders. And you're part of the same operation." "We never killed anyone," Jessica said quickly. "Even if what you're saying about this Rodriguez woman is true, we never actually hurt anyone." "Really? What about Maria Santos?" Silence. "What about the 18-year-old girl whose baby you bought? The girl who died during delivery under suspicious circumstances? The girl whose death gave you the heir you needed to justify inheriting my fortune?" "That wasn't... We didn't know." Marcus started, then stopped. "Didn't know what?" "That Lauren Rodriguez was running a black market baby operation using vulnerable teenage girls? Didn't know that those girls had a habit of dying during delivery? Didn't know that you were accessories to murder?" I pulled out another document, Maria's death certificate, which Alex had obtained through his contacts. Maria Santos died from what the medical examiner called unexpected cardiac arrest during delivery. But according to the nurse who was present, Maria was healthy, young, and showing no signs of distress right up until the moment she stopped breathing. Grace had returned and was standing in the doorway, listening to everything. "The same nurse," I continued, "who told my investigator that Lauren Rodriguez was present during the delivery and that she personally administered what she claimed was a routine medication just minutes before Maria went into cardiac arrest." "Your investigator?" Marcus asked weakly. "Oh yes. Did you think I was handling this alone? I have a private investigator, surveillance photos, financial records, medical documents, and testimony from multiple sources." I smiled coldly. "I also have something else you might find interesting." I walked over to what used to be William's desk and opened the top drawer, pulling out a small digital recorder. "I've been recording this entire conversation. Every word you've said, every admission you've made, every piece of evidence you've confirmed." I held up the recorder. "Did you know that in California, only one party needs to consent to recording a conversation? And since this is taking place in what used to be my home, I think I qualify as a consenting party." Jessica jumped to her feet. "You can't use that in court, it's entrapment or something." "Actually, it's evidence. Evidence of conspiracy, fraud, and accessory to murder. Evidence that will put both of you in prison for a very long time." Marcus finally found his voice. "What do you want?" "What do I want?" I laughed, and it wasn't a pleasant sound. "I want my money back. I want that baby properly adopted by a family who will love him and tell him the truth about his birth mother. I want Lauren Rodriguez arrested for the serial killer she is. And I want you both to spend the rest of your lives remembering that you tried to murder your own mother for money." "And if we cooperate?" Jessica asked. "If you cooperate, I might consider not pressing charges for attempted murder. The fraud charges, the conspiracy charges, the accessory to murder charges, those are out of my hands now. But attempted murder is my choice." I looked at both of them. These two people who had shared my home, my table, my family holidays, who had planned my death with the same casual efficiency they might use to plan a vacation. "You have 24 hours to decide." They chose poorly. Instead of confessing, instead of cooperating, instead of showing even a hint of remorse for trying to murder me, Marcus and Jessica decided to double down on their original plan. I discovered this at 5 a.m. the next morning when Alex Rivera called Mrs. Nguyen's guest house with an urgent warning. "They're moving fast," he said without preamble. I've been monitoring their communications, and they spent all night on the phone with Lauren Rodriguez and someone else. Someone they kept referring to as the cleaner. I was instantly awake. What kind of cleaner? The kind who makes problems disappear permanently. They're planning to have you killed again, and this time they want to make sure the body is found. So there's no question about your death. Mrs. Nguyen, who had been listening from the kitchen doorway, immediately started making phone calls. Within 15 minutes, Tommy Morrison was at our front door with his pickup truck, and we were evacuating to a safe house Alex had arranged. "How much time do we have?" I asked, as we drove through the pre-dawn darkness. "Not much. The cleaner they hired is flying in from Las Vegas this morning. According to my sources, he specializes in making murders look like accidents, and he's got a perfect success rate." The safe house was a small cottage on a private island accessible only by boat. Tommy knew the owner, another fisherman who owed him favors and didn't ask questions. We reached it just as the sun was coming up over the Pacific. "This is insane," I said, sitting at the cottage's kitchen table with a cup of coffee, trying to process what was happening. "My own son hired a professional killer to murder me." "People do terrible things for money," Tommy said grimly, "but we're not going to let them get away with it." Alex arrived an hour later with more disturbing news. "It's worse than we thought. Lauren Rodriguez isn't just running a murder for inheritance scheme. She's part of a larger network. They've been targeting wealthy, elderly people across the West Coast for years." He spread out photographs and documents across the table. "I've identified at least 25 suspicious deaths over the past 6 years. All wealthy seniors, all with greedy relatives, all ruled accidental or natural despite circumstances that should have triggered investigations." "How are they getting away with it?" "They've got people inside the system: medical examiners, police detectives, probate judges. It's not just a family business. It's organized crime with a very specific target demographic." Mrs. Nguyen, who had insisted on coming with us despite the danger, was studying the photographs with a keen eye. "This woman here," she said, pointing to a surveillance photo. "I've seen her before." "Where?" "At the hospital where I volunteer. She was there about 8 months ago, asking questions about elderly patients who didn't have family visitors. Said she was from some kind of social services agency." Alex and I exchanged looks. She was scouting for targets? "And now they're coming after you because you're the first person who survived their operation and can testify about what they do." "Then we need to make sure my testimony is heard before they have a chance to silence me," I said. I spent the rest of that morning writing everything down. Every detail of Marcus and Jessica's betrayal, every piece of evidence we'd gathered about Lauren Rodriguez's operation, every name and date and transaction I could remember. If something happened to me, at least the truth would survive. But around noon, Alex's phone rang with news that changed everything. "They found the cleaner," he said after ending the call. "Dead in his hotel room. Single gunshot to the head. Professional execution." "What does that mean?" "It means Lauren Rodriguez is cleaning house. Anyone who can connect her to the murder network is being eliminated, including potentially your son and daughter-in-law." The thought of Marcus being murdered should have terrified me. Instead, I felt a cold satisfaction that surprised me with its intensity. "Good," I said. "Let them find out what it feels like to be betrayed by someone they trusted." But Tommy was shaking his head. "You don't understand, Helen. If Rodriguez is eliminating witnesses, that includes you, but it also includes that baby. An orphaned infant with no legal guardians is a loose end she can't afford." My blood ran cold. William Maria. She'll have him killed too. Make it look like a tragic accident. Gas leak, house fire, something that eliminates the evidence along with the witness. I stood up so fast I knocked over my coffee cup. "We have to get him. It's too dangerous. They'll be watching your old house, waiting for you to show up." "Then I guess I'll have to give them what they're waiting for." The plan was simple. which made it terrifying. I would surrender myself to Marcus and Jessica, let them think they'd won, and trust that Alex and Tommy would be in position to rescue both me and baby William Maria when Lauren Rodriguez showed up to clean house. "This is the stupidest plan I've ever heard," Mrs. Nguyen said, as we prepared to return to the mainland. "It's the only way to save that baby," I replied, checking the hidden recording devices Alex had given me, and to get enough evidence to bring down Rodriguez's entire operation. Alex had been monitoring communications all morning. Lauren Rodriguez was driving up from Los Angeles, planning to arrive at my former house by evening. Marcus and Jessica had been told to have me there alive, so Rodriguez could question me about what I knew before arranging my final accident. "They think I'm going to trade my life for the babies," I told Tommy as his boat approached the dock in Santa Barbara. "They have no idea I've been planning this for days." The recording devices were hidden throughout my former house, planted by Grace Thompson while Marcus and Jessica were out making their arrangements with Rodriguez. Grace had also positioned cameras in strategic locations and would be hiding in the basement with baby William Maria, ready to escape through the old service entrance if things went wrong. "You sure about this?" Tommy asked as we reached the dock. "I'm sure that if I don't do this, an innocent baby will die because of my son's greed. That's not something I can live with." I walked up to my former front door at exactly 7 p.m. "As arranged," Marcus answered, looking haggard and frightened. "Mom," he said, and for just a moment I heard my little boy in his voice, the child I'd raised, loved, sacrificed for. "Hello, Marcus. I'm here as promised." Jessica was pacing in the living room, her usual composure completely shattered. "She'll be here soon," she said, without looking at me. "Lauren Rodriguez. She wants to talk to you." "I'm sure she does." "Mom," Marcus started, then stopped. "I never wanted it to go this far." "But you let it," I said simply. "You let it go this far because $2.8 billion was worth more to you than your mother's life." He couldn't meet my eyes. Lauren Rodriguez arrived precisely at 8 p.m. She was smaller than I'd expected. A neat, professional-looking woman who could have been anyone's accountant or lawyer, which I supposed she was. "Mrs. Chen," she said pleasantly, extending her hand as if we were meeting at a cocktail party. "I'm so glad you survived your boating accident. We have a great deal to discuss." "I'm sure we do." She sat across from me in what used to be my own living room, opened a leather portfolio, and began speaking as if we were negotiating a business contract. "You've caused quite a bit of trouble for my clients," she said. "Marcus and Jessica followed my instructions precisely, and yet here you are, very much alive and apparently well informed about matters that don't concern you." "Murder concerns me, especially when it's my own. I prefer to think of what we do as estate planning acceleration, helping families access inheritances that would otherwise be tied up for years in lengthy probate proceedings." She smiled coldly. "We provide a valuable service to people who understand that time is money." "And the elderly people you kill? What service do you provide to them?" "Peace. An end to the confusion and fear that comes with age-related cognitive decline. A dignified death that allows their families to remember them as they were, not as they become." I stared at her, amazed by her ability to rationalize mass murder. "How many? How many what? How many people have you killed?" She consulted her portfolio as if checking appointment schedules. "Over the past 6 years, my clients and I have successfully resolved 42 cases involving elderly individuals whose continued existence was creating financial and emotional hardship for their families." 42 murders. She was confessing to 42 murders as if they were tax returns she'd filed. "And you're planning to make me number 43? "Oh, Mrs. Chen, I'm afraid you'll be number 44. We had to resolve another matter earlier today. A gentleman who was becoming too curious about our operations." She smiled. But yes, you will unfortunately need to have another accident, a more permanent one this time. And the baby? Tragic gas leak. These old houses, faulty heating systems can be so dangerous. I looked at Marcus and Jessica, who were sitting frozen on the sofa like mannequins. This is what you wanted? Not just my death, but the death of an innocent baby? Neither of them answered. The baby is a loose end, Rodriguez continued matter-of-factly. His existence complicates the inheritance structure, and his origins raise too many questions. Much simpler to eliminate him now and claim that Marcus and Jessica are tragically childless and in need of the emotional support that only significant wealth can provide. That's when I smiled for the first time since she'd arrived. "Miss Rodriguez," I said pleasantly, "I think there's something you should know." "And what's that?" "You're under arrest." The FBI agents came through every door simultaneously, front, back, basement, and even through the windows. They'd been listening to every word Lauren Rodriguez had said, recording her confession to 42 murders and her plans to commit 2 more. "Lauren Rodriguez," Agent Maria Santos announced, "you're under arrest for conspiracy to commit murder, wire fraud, elder abuse, and racketeering." Rodriguez tried to run. She actually bolted for the kitchen, probably hoping to escape through the back door. She made it about 10 feet before 3 agents tackled her to my former hardwood floors. Marcus and Jessica just sat there in shock as Agent Santos read them their rights. "Helen Chen," Agent Santos said, turning to me with a smile. "That was extremely dangerous and extremely well done." It turned out that Alex Rivera wasn't just a private investigator. He was a former FBI agent who'd been working undercover to investigate the elder abuse network that Lauren Rodriguez had been running. My case had provided the perfect opportunity to get Rodriguez to confess on tape to her entire operation. "We've been tracking her for 3 years," Agent Santos explained, as the house filled with crime scene technicians. "But she was too careful, too smart. She never directly participated in the murders. She always used intermediaries and made sure she had plausible deniability." "Until today," I said. "Until today, when she confessed to 42 murders while planning 2 more, on federal recording equipment." Grace Peterson came up from the basement carrying baby William Maria, both of them unharmed. "Is it over?" she asked. "It's over," I confirmed, taking the baby from her arms. "At least the dangerous part is over." The legal part took months. Marcus and Jessica were charged with conspiracy to commit murder, fraud, elder abuse, and accessory to murder in the death of Maria Santos. They both took plea deals, 30 years for Marcus, 25 for Jessica. Lauren Rodriguez went to trial and was convicted on all counts. Life in prison without possibility of parole. The network she'd built was dismantled over the following year. 22 other conspirators were arrested, including corrupt medical examiners, probate lawyers, and family members who'd participated in the murders. The investigation revealed that the operation had stolen over $180 million from elderly victims across 7 states. But the most important outcome was baby William Maria. I legally adopted him with the full support of the court system and Maria Santos's extended family, who were found living in Mexico. They were grateful that someone was willing to raise Maria's son and tell him the truth about his brave young mother who had tried to give him a better life. "His real name is William Maria Chen," I explained to the family court judge. "William for his grandfather, Maria for his birth mother, and Chen because that's the family that will love him and raise him with the truth about where he came from." The judge, a woman in her 50s who'd been following the case closely, smiled. "I think Maria Santos would be proud of how her story ended. I'm 74 now, 5 years later, and William Maria is a remarkable little boy who knows exactly who he is and where he came from. He knows his birth mother was a brave teenager named Maria who wanted him to have a good life. He knows his adoptive father and stepmother tried to use him in a scheme that cost Maria her life, and he knows that sometimes the people who are supposed to love you the most are the ones you have to protect yourself from. Mrs. Nguyen still runs her guest house, though she's added a sideline as a consultant, helping other elderly people who suspect their families might not have their best interests at heart. Tommy Morrison still runs his fishing charters, but he's also become something of a local legend for pulling dying grandmothers out of the Pacific Ocean. And Alex Rivera, Agent Rivera, still works for the FBI. But he sends me Christmas cards every year with photos of other elderly people whose lives he's helped save. As for Marcus and Jessica, they're still in prison. Marcus writes me letters sometimes, trying to explain why he did what he did, asking for forgiveness, claiming he was manipulated by people smarter than him. I don't write back, because here's what I learned during my week as a dead woman. Family isn't about blood or obligation or inheritance. It's about showing up when someone needs you, protecting the vulnerable, and choosing love over greed every single day. William, Maria, and I have that kind of family now. The kind where no one gets pushed off boats, no one steals trust funds, and no one has to die for someone else to get rich. It's a much better family than the one I was born into, and definitely better than the one I raised. Thanks for listening. Don't forget to subscribe and feel free to share your story in the comments. Your voice matters.